My friends, the blurry object that you see before you today is the Arion SMM-1 Stereo Metal Master. This pedal is so metal, so unbelievably metal, that it had to be put in a plastic case, because if you put this thing in a metal case, that would be way too much metal. Just too much metal. The SMM-1 rocks so hard it rocked its battery cover off a long time ago, and so does not display the name Stereo Metal Master, but trust me, that's what it's called. Now, if you are one of the 5 or 6 people who listen to my music, you might be wondering why I have a Stereo Metal Master. Because I don't chug, I don't shred, and I definitely don't gent. So, why the Metal Master? Well, you see, kids, gather round. I'm telling you a tale of the 1990s. Long ago, I was a keyboard player in a band, and I had these wonderful 1980s analog synthesizers. But it was the 90s, and wonderful 1980s analog synthesizers were kind of on the way out. You see, the 90s, everything was dirty. Guitars were dirty, bass was dirty, drummers were dirty as usual. In fact, I know people that didn't take a shower for like the entire decade. Everything had to be dirty, so I needed to get my keyboards a little bit dirtier. I went down to my local pawn shop that sold musical items, and I saw this guy, much as you see it now, without the battery cover, on the shelf for $15. And even in 1990, $15 wasn't a whole lot of money. Now, without the nameplate, I didn't know that this was the Stereo Metal Master. All I knew was that it was the SMM-1 and that it had knobs for bass and treble and distortion. And that meant it was an overdrive or distortion pedal. Now, if this were 2000 something or other, I would have pulled out my little pocket Google Puter and I would have typed in Arion SMM-1. I would have found out that this was indeed the Stereo Metal Master. And I probably wouldn't have bought it. But back then, we didn't have pocket Google Puters. We had to live dangerously, by the seat of our pants, by intuition, and by trial and error. So, I bought this pedal for 15 beans, not even knowing what it was. When I got home and plugged it into my keyboards, I found that it really wasn't all that great with a keyboard. And I ended up not using it. I think I replaced it shortly thereafter with a Zoom 505, which was some pretty awesome hotness at the time. And this thing went into a box. Well, great ages of the earth passed since then. I've gone digital, I've gone analog, I've gone software, I've gone back to analog, I've bought pedals, I've lost pedals, pedals have broken, I've sold them. And what it comes down to is that now, my only dirt pedal, aside from an octave fuzz, is, you guessed it, the Arion Stereo Metal Master SMM-1. So, today, I want to look at the Arion SMM-1, partly to demo it for you, and partly as an exercise to show you that just because it says metal doesn't mean you have to be a metal player to get some utility out of it. Alright, to demonstrate this pedal, I've got it hooked up to my little custom Tube 12 amplifier. On the other end, I've got my Washburn WI-64. It's kind of a less polished sort of guitar if you're not familiar with them. One of the interesting features is that instead of tone knobs, it's got a special knob where you can roll off the humbucker into a single coil. So it's kind of like a coil splitter on a knob. But anyway, I'm starting out with a super clean tone using a single coil at the neck pickup like this. Sorry, it's a little out of tune. That's just how it's going to be. But that's my clean tone. So let's kick on the old stereo Metal Master. Metal Master has 4 knobs. You'll see level, bass, highs, actually lows, highs, and distortion. I've got the level set for roughly unity gain. I've got my lows and my highs set right in the middle, which means it's not altering anything. And my distortion is all the way down. This is how I generally run it. Let's see what this sounds like. So you get a nice kind of whoopy little overdrive. It's not super exciting, but it dirties it up just a little. You know, the bass and the treble controls, the low and high controls, they're kind of not too useful. And let me show you that. So the low control is an EQ at about, I think, 300 hertz or so. I measured this once. If I turn it up, it's not too noticeable there. Let me crank it. It definitely adds some boominess. Not real useful for me when I'm recording. That's something I'm just gonna cut that out. Okay, I'm just gonna high pass that because, you know, to make room for the bass. You can, of course, cut as well as boost. It's pretty thin sounding, so, you know, useful for small adjustments. Mostly I just leave it alone. The highs, you know, when I think high on a guitar, I'm thinking 4 kilohertz, 6 kilohertz, you know, that's sparkly range. No, high on this pedal is like 1.5 kilohertz, which is really more of an upper mids, a very nasal area. Let me crank that up for you. Very crunchy, very mid-rangey. Not super pleasant either. Now, if you go the other way with it, cut it out. It's kind of that scoop tone. I just got to believe that's the way they intended that to be used because, I mean, why would you boost that frequency? It's just not pleasant. All right, let's set that back there. Let's kick up the drive a little bit. Let's go up to about 9 o'clock there. Definitely getting more in the metal territory, a little bit more. Yeah, we're crunchy. That would be useful. I would still use that. I rock out now and then. You know, you've heard my music. If you haven't, you should. Go check out my music. Let's crank it up to noon. Very, very much more sizzly on top. Getting a lot of that sizzle. Now here would be a great time if you want that scoop tone to pull out those highs. There you go. All right, let's get that back though. I don't really like to use those EQs a lot. They're just not frequencies that I really want to mess with, and you know, I got EQs in my DAW, so just as soon push it through the amp and you know, do the sculpting with better tools. Let's keep that distortion going up a little bit more. Let's take it up to about 3 o'clock there. Well, that's pretty driven. It's getting a little bit fizzly on top. I don't know if the noise comes through on the video or not, but there is a lot of noise coming out of this pedal. It picks up some of the computer activity. It's kind of just weird little data center-y noises going on. Hopefully that's not too loud in the video, but that happens. So let's crank this guy. Yeah, I'm not playing real well today. Alright, I'll stop embarrassing myself. So you can see there's not a lot of difference there between 3 o'clock and cranked. Once you get past a certain point, it's just more gain, not really changing the sound a whole lot. Now, it is, of course, the stereo Metal Master, and that's a bit of a misnomer. When I think of what stereo means, to me, stereo means you can take one channel right, one channel left, and that's supposed to be how it sounds. The SMM-1 actually has 2 outputs. You can see them here on the side. I'll just move that around. That second output isn't really stereo. It's actually a dual function output. And I'm going to stop the video a second. I'm going to switch that output and I'm going to show you what it does. Alright, so I've switched the output. Let me get this just a little more in the light there. Sorry about the camera focus, guys. I'm not good at this. Just trying my first attempt here. Anyway, so the second output has 2 modes. You see the little switch at the top says direct or soft. Now if you switch that to direct, you just get your straight clean tone right through. That's actually kind of a cool feature because I can use this as a splitter, take say the clean side through a different amp, a different pedal, get a totally different distortion tone, blend that back together, or maybe blend clean sound back into distortion, useful on bass, obviously. The other side, you see it there, it says soft. So I'm actually going to turn the gain all the way back down. And let's start listening to this. So already you can hear, compared to the other side, there's a lot less gain, first of all, and a bit less in the high end. This is a bit more of a covered sound. I'm assuming this side of the circuit is kind of a tube screamery thing, because there's a lot more mids, but I don't know. I don't have a tube screamer to compare to. Let's crank up the gain a bit. Let's go ahead and take it to noon. Definitely a way more muddy sound. And you think, oh, well, just turn up the highs. Okay, let's do that. still muddy because that's not really a highs, is it? It's a high mids. Yeah, it just gets kind of more nasal. There's also a lot of bass cut on this side. If we cut the bass even more, almost starts to sound like my little Smoky amp. We can add that bass back in. Let's give it a boost. Very dark, very woofy. Let's crank this up. Let's crank the soft side. You know, it sounds almost like I've got my tone knob all the way down, which is impossible because this guitar actually doesn't have tone knobs, as I explained earlier. But yeah, I've got to imagine there's just some sort of low-pass filter before the distortion on this thing. I guess if you want that kind of Santana-ish tone, this kind of gets you in the ballpark. And it's alright. It's useful. It just doesn't have a lot of high end, not a lot of sparkle or character. Not really my cup of tea. So, yeah, let's, tell you what. Let me stop the video. I'm going to switch it back to the normal channel, and we'll just listen to that by comparison. Alright, we're back. And so is the high end. Yeah, a little better, a little more transparent. Not quite so woof woof. Alright, well, you've heard the stereo Metal Master. You've heard it. Before we go, there is one thing we must do. We must crank it. All the knobs. I have heard that this pedal is meant to be... I'm going to leave the level alone. I've heard that this pedal is meant to be a clone of the HM2, and most people say those are supposed to be just cranked. You can hear that noise there, can't you? Yeah, it's pretty brutal. All right, let's do this. So there you go, friends. That is the Arion SMM-1 Stereo Metal Master. Now, you've heard that it can make some pretty awful tones and a lot of noise, but it can make some pretty usable ones too. So hopefully that inspires you that whatever gear you have, you can get something out of it. Please check out my original songs and subscribe to this channel, and we hope to see you back soon. God bless.